All right, morning, folks.
Afternoon, sir.
Yeah, so first things first. Honestly, I don't want hybrid virtual class and I don't turn up early. You know that the persons who are in the lab reach early? Yeah,
Well, I
nobody.
mean, sir, like I was with no, sir, because I was trying to get the right link from 12 o'clock, but then I went back into the chat and then like realized it says the wrong link.
Oh, all right.
Sir.
You folks are forgiven
Yeah,
this
man,
time,
sorry.
all right?
Thank you, sir. Thank
Yeah, man, cool. All right, so let's get cracking. I'm going to share my screen. By the way, have you all watched the recording?
Have we all did what, sir?
The recording. Didn't I put up the recording from last time? Huh?
For the server side, like lab? Yes, sir. I watched like some of it, but that was like to help me with the
you.
what
Yeah,
they
sir.
gave Monday.
Hold on, you watched some of it, but what?
I watched some of it for like the work they gave us Monday. I had to look through it to help me.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so it's important that you go through the recordings and stuff. All right, folks. Now, I have also placed a document in the folder. Please go to the folder and access the document. It should be this document that you see being displayed. The screen is showing, right?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir. Your
sir.
screen is showing.
Yeah, so it should be this document. So while you load that up, let me just do the preamble. As we would have indicated, what we are doing in this module predominantly is working with APIs, application programming interfaces. And we had indicated that APIs provide us with a standard way of having applications communicate with each other. We would have also looked at we would have also looked at some of the protocols which are important in terms of interacting with the APIs, namely looking at the get, post, delete, and put commands. We would have explained some of the terminologies which are going to be important, like endpoint, look at some of the file structures which you will be interacting with, like JSON. And then you did a few experiments, exercises um, that relate to using the curl command to interact with the fake API, the fake store API. So that's where you are in the process. What I would have also indicated, however, is that the aim of this particular module is not just that you understand how to communicate with these APIs, but also so that you, as a developer, can construct these APIs from scratch and then have other persons out there consume these services. So that is what we're looking at. And we're not taking a whole lot of time to get there. So in terms of the document that you have in front of you today, it sort of scaffolds you into what is required. in terms of getting you to that point. Albeit it's a simplified, it's a simplified version, it nevertheless highlights some of the critical points that you need to consider and put into practice as you build out or construct your own APIs. I will be using as the tool set Visual Studio Code simply because I like Visual Studio Code. If you feel better with PyCharm, then feel free to use it. If you want to work with some other editor, then that's up to you. But for the duration of the module, I will be standardizing in terms of Visual Studio Code. Just give me a second, please. Let me add persons who are joining. Yeah, so that's where we are in the process. Now, the document that you have sort of guides you through all of this. So what I will do is I will go through the basic things in terms of the document so that you have a pretty good understanding of the roadmap, and then you will use the rest of the session to build out this API and to interact with it. If that is understood in the chat, just type U. Why it look like only 2% understand? So if you don't understand, type N. You have to make up your mind, Joel. Understanding, you don't understand.
Oh wait, sir. I thought you said if you understand, type N because I thought you were like switching it up.
Oh,
Bad,
brother.
bad. Yes, sir. I
I
understand.
say if you understand, type U, and if you
Understand.
don't understand, type N.
Oh, sir. Okay, I understand, sir. Yes, sir.
So Jason, you don't understand either.
No, sir, I'm kind of confused. We're like, so we need to create the virtual environment in the terminal itself
Hold
to
on now.
begin
I
the
don't one
APIs
minute,
on.
Jason. I don't tell you nothing about
Okay.
creating a virtual environment yet. I said the aim of
Uh,
this session is to walk you through so that you understand the rules to what you need to do. So after I walk you through, that is when you will now use the knowledge to duplicate this. You understand now?
okay, sir. I understand.
All
Yeah, I
right, cool.
understand, sir.
So there are several things that we need to talk about, right? So let me start with my editor. So this is the editor. And one of the first thing I want to point out in the editor is the section here. So what you're seeing here, number one, is the name of a folder. So the name of the folder in this instance is FastAPI. So that's a physical folder that has been created on the machine. And inside that folder is where you'll now find the various elements which are listed below. Note that the indentation sort of gives you an idea of where the things are in relationship to each other. So you would realize that on the FastAPI, these things are indented, which means that they are to be found inside the FastAPI folder. So I think that should be understood. So type U if you're still good. Well, type G if you're good. All right, excellent. So the other thing that we want to bear in mind is that right at the top, beside the folder, you will find you'll find some icons. The two that we are primarily interested in are the first two. One of them allows us to create files within the folder, and the other allows us to create folders within the folder. So if I hover over, then you should see which one creates the new file and which one creates the folder. So it's a pretty simple thing in terms of knowing how to navigate the, the interface. The second thing that I want to bear in mind is that the codes which are written, I have actually placed them inside this file called server.py. So it's a Python file. You know, from the other day, we have been talking about Python and the fact that it has many uses. So once again, we are using Python as the means of instruction so that you are working with something that is similar or familiar, sorry. So because it's a Python file, then it needs to end in a py extension. And that being said, then we are now ready to start talking about some of the things that we need. So going back to our document, once you have set
Oh,
up
wait,
your,
sir.
is there a question?
Sir, yes, sir, I have a question. Just real quick, sir. Can you actually repeat what you said, like, before you asked, if we're good, type G? 'Cause I think I just misunderstood, like, something you said.
I what you just said a while ago.
It's in the chat, actually, sir.
So I misunderstood what I said. Oh, what you said good too? Well, based on what I
Yeah.
just said a while ago. So what I have just spoken about is the user interface and how to navigate it.
Oh, okay then. Okay. I don't know why, but like I just completely heard something else, and I just typed good, and I was like, wait a minute, no, that's not what you're saying.
So you
But
understand
okay,
the
so I
user
understand.
interface.
Yes, sir.
You know how to create a new file.
Yes, sir. I use
No,
Visual
you know
Studio
how to
Code.
create a
All
new
right.
folder.
Yes, sir.
All right, good. So that is where we are. So once you do all of that, so for example, you create this folder, and this folder can name what you want it to name. I just call it FastAPI because that is the tool that we're going to be using. Then once you create the folder, all you have to do is to open that folder in Visual Studio Code, which is pretty simple. You go to File, Open Folder, and you would simply navigate to wherever the folder is, and then you would select the folder. So that's not a difficult thing to do. So the things which are going to be critical is what do we do once we are inside the, the program. Now, the first thing that you want to do is to open up a terminal window. And the control and the back tick does that for you. So this is the terminal window where you see my cursor blinking. It's the control key and the back tick. Some of you might be asking, what is the backtick? It is that symbol that I just typed. So on most keyboards, it is going to be located beneath the squiggly. And what I call the squiggly, I call that the squiggly. I think you should know where to find the backtick now, right, folks? If you know where to find the backtick now, type B. So B for backtick. No, not D, not D. B, B as in backtick. So that opens the terminal window. Right, so it's under the tilde. So it is not the tilde, Sir Dowdy. It's that character under the tilde. So the tilde is that symbol. Right. But on the same key where the tilde is, you usually find the backtick, which is that symbol. All right, so I think we're good there. So. And what that does is it opens up your terminal window. Now, once your terminal window is open, there are a few configuration steps that you're going to want to perform. And the first one is we want to create something known as a virtual environment. And in my version, what I'm working with, you should be seeing that on my status, on my prompt, and this might not happen in yours, but on my prompt, you realize that it tells me that I am currently inside my virtual environment. In other words, my virtual environment has been activated. Another place to see it is right down here on your, don't even know what they call this. Let's call it a status bar. So if you look on my status bar, right down at the bottom of the screen, then you can see that the virtual environment has been enabled. And you're also seeing the Python version that I'm currently running with, which is 3.13.5. So those are some of the common indicators you can look for to know, one, whether or not your virtual environment is activated. If you want to see the folder that I am currently inside, then the path to my folder is actually listed here. So I'm actually on my C drive inside my users folder, inside Horret folder, inside downloads, inside Mosh, inside FastAPI. So it's important to know where you are on your directory structure so that you are pointing to the correct folder that you want to open up inside the environment. And the reason why this is important is because, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to do a few configuration steps. And the first configuration step is to create what we call a virtual environment. And we create a virtual environment by making use of the command that is highlighted on the screen. So it's Python -m venv, and then followed by the name you want to call your virtual environment. In my example, I'm calling my virtual environment .venv. If you go back here and look, you also realize that it creates a folder with the virtual environment name. So there is the folder. So it means I would have typed Python -m VNV and then the name of my virtual folder, which is .venv. So that would have been the command that I would have used to create my virtual environment. Once you have created a virtual environment, and by the way, it will take a little time to do what it's doing, because if you have a look at the virtual environment here, you realize that it has some files which are listed. So there's going to be some downloading and stuff which are going to be done. So once it finishes what it's doing, then the next step is to activate the virtual environment. And what I'm saying now is for Windows, because I am working on Windows. So how you activate the virtual environment on Windows, you type .venv, which means you're going inside this virtual folder. You're going under the folder called scripts, and you're going to be running the activate operation or file. So therefore means that the command that I would actually be typing after I have created my virtual environment is going to be this, what you see highlighted on the screen. And that is what will then activate the virtual environment and give me these indicators. Indicator 1, and depending on how your prompt is set up, you might also see indicator 2. All right, great. So I trust that you have been doing all of that as we speak. So right now your virtual environment is set up and it is also activated. So type A so that I can know that you have been following and you have your virtual environment activated. Well, I had given ample time as I was explaining so that you could be following along. But if you want to watch the video when we finish and then you do it afterwards, I mean, then that's fine. But I was thinking that you would have been listening and just doing it at the same time.
Okay, sir. So all we just need to do is just like create the virtual environment and then activate it. That
Yeah,
is
but
how far
remember
we
that you create a folder first and you
create a
go
folder.
into the
Okay.
folder, right?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And then after that, you
Okay,
open
so
up the terminal window and then you start to perform these commands so that you can set up the virtual environment.
okay, sir.
And you might be wondering, why do we set up a virtual environment? Well, think of a virtual environment almost as if it is a virtual machine. And why you use a virtual machine is because you want to isolate your processes so that they don't interfere with other processes. So what we are doing here is we are setting up, let's call it a boundary box, so that we can install different libraries or dependencies inside of it, which are essential for our code to work properly. And we don't want these different libraries because they may have different versions. We don't want them to be conflicting with other versions that might exist elsewhere on the machine. Hence, we are creating this boundary box and we are installing everything inside the boundary box that we know that our application is going to need so that it can function properly without interfering with other similar libraries that might exist on the machine. So that is the rationale for operating inside a virtual environment. Now, once you have activated your virtual environment, then it's now time for you to install your dependencies. That is the word that you will hear being used more often than not. That's the word that you'll also be reading as you go through your documentation. But a dependency is nothing more than a library. It's a library that provides some form of functionality, and we want to get access to that functionality. So we are making the library available to our program, to our code base. So that's what we're going to do next. And the libraries that we want, one of them is going to be FastAPI, obviously. And the other one is going to be Uvicorn. And if you have a look at the screen now, then you see the different steps that you need to follow in terms of installing both FastAPI and Uvicorn. So FastAPI is the tool that we are using to construct the API. So it is our API framework. And Uvicorn is going to be the software that we are going to use to run the API. In other words, the API must be up and running for us to be able to interact with it. If you go back to the Fake Store API, it was up and running on a server. And because it was running, that is why you were able to interact with it in real time. So it's important that we have a way of running these APIs so that they can be accessed. And this is what we call our server. So we want to serve the API so that it can accept requests and it can process these requests and generate some form of a response. So you will need to install these two libraries, dependencies, into your virtual environment. So just to show you what I would have done to install UVCon, for example, I would have typed the command that you're seeing now being displayed. And also, in terms of installing FastAPI, then I would have done that installation as well. Don't put the double quotes. I don't even sure if it probably don't matter. All right, so once it downloaded something, then you're fine. All right, so remember, all of this configuration will take a bit of time. Not very, very long, but you will still have to wait maybe a minute or two because it's going to do some installation. Now, you can check to see if FastAPI has been installed if you want to check after the process finish. I can use the command displayed here to do that. And in terms of running your application, once it's up and running, then the command that you're going to use is this command. UVcorn, which is the server, we're telling the server, the UVcorn server, that we want to start it. And then we are going to have the name of our file. In this case, they are saying, or they are assuming that it's called main.py. But in our case, in my case, I actually called it server.py. So instead of main, it means that you would have server. And this thing over right beside it that speaks about app, this is actually going to be the name that you are going to call your FastAPI service. When I go back to the program, that will become clearer. So going back to the program, if we look at line 2, then you realize on line 2, that I'm using the FastAPI service and I'm assigning it to a variable called app. So it is this variable, app, that I'm referring to, or that I was referring to on the previous page. It's just a variable name, so you could have called it anything you wanted to call it. You could have called it FAPI, for example. You just need to know that that is what you are referring to. Additionally, I had indicated that the name of my file is server.py. So it means that in that code, I'm going to have server, colon, and then app. When I'm serving up the API using UVcorn. So once again, once you get access to the recording, then I'm just encouraging you to watch it a few times and practice as you watch it, so that you can follow the steps that I'm doing easily. Now, once all of that is done, then it's time for us to start writing code. And the first thing we would do, if we have not yet done it, is to create that server.py file. And once we have created it, then our next step is to populate it. We're going to populate it with the codes which are important. And this just gives you a bird's eye view of the IDE, which is the interface that we are using to write the code. But in terms of allowing you to see the content better, then we kind of split it up into both the project structure, so that you're sure what your project structure is supposed to look like, and also into the codes that were actually written. So let's quickly run through some of the essential points. Remember, we had installed the FastAPI library. And from that library, we want to use a service called FastAPI. Notice that the spellings in terms of uppercase is different. And there's another service called HTTP exception that allows us to process errors. So these are the two components that we are pulling from the FastAPI library. And as we mentioned before, because we are making use of a FastAPI service, then we need to take that service and assign it to some variable. And that's what we are doing on line 2. We're taking the FastAPI service and we are assigning that service to a variable called app. And we still talk about why that is important. But let's move on to line 5. On line 5, we are making use of a list. And the reason why we know we are making use of a list is because we see the square brackets. So this is something that we would have covered in our last class. Whenever we see the square brackets, we're talking about a list. Well, we covered it in the gaming class, to be precise. And whenever we see the curly brackets, then we're talking about something called a dictionary. In this example, we are making use of a list so that we can simulate adding and updating things in the API. And just to be clear, we are not using a database. We're actually using a list to act as if or simulate a database. Because if we can get data in and out of the list, then it means that we can get data in and out of a database once we know how to connect to the database properly and once we're able to configure it properly. So remember, the way we're approaching the module is we're doing things which are simple first, and then we build upon that knowledge as we get a little bit more advanced. I think that's a nice way of putting it. So right here we have a list. The list is called items. And inside this list, we have a few fruits being mentioned: apple, banana, and cherry. Now, one of the first APIs that we always want to write is the API that will retrieve data. And in this case, we are targeting such an API. How do we know that we're targeting the API? We just have to have a look at the verbs which are being used. And I had said before that we will revisit what this app really gives us. And you are seeing it in action right here. This app is what FastAPI has that provides us with access to the HTTP verbs, which are get, post, delete, and put. So right here on line 8, we are making use of the get protocol. In other words, we want to write an API that we can interact with the API by using the get operation when we're making use of the curl command. So we would say curl.exe -x, well, big X, and then we would have get after to indicate that we're talking about the HTTP get operation or get protocol. But in order to get that to work, we have to first of all set up the infrastructure in code so that the code is able to represent what this get function would look like. The other thing that is important is that in the brackets, we have our endpoint. So this tells us that the endpoint is going to be items. Remember, I had indicated that the true definition of the endpoint is that last folder that we are looking at when we look at the URL. The essence here, or the implications here, is that there's going to be some stuff that is going to precede items. It's going to come before items, such as the HTTP protocol, the URL in terms of the domain name. We might also need the port. So all of those are going to be stuff that will come before the endpoint. And after we have all of those, then we will now have the endpoint attached to that. So we have to define a function that will be served whenever we access the API. In other words, whenever we issue a GET request to the items endpoint, we want to execute the function that we have defined. And the function that we have defined here is called read items. What does read items do? It returns the items which are inside the list. So if I issue a get command, then what it means is that I should see at the end a list of all the items which are inside my item list. So let's demonstrate that quickly. Let's do a clear, CLS to clear. Notice I'm still in my virtual environment. And what we want to do is to do a curl. I think this would have been the command that was executed when we were doing the testing of everything. So it's curl.exe dash big X, then get. And what do we want to get? We want to get the local domain, which is found at HTTP 127.0.0.1. And we're also talking about port 8000. So this section is the local domain. And the other section is actually our port number. And finally, right at the end, we are now going to have our endpoint. So the endpoint is /items. And if we execute that, then we should hope that we are going to get back some data from the API. So I want you to watch carefully for what is going to happen. And I want you to tell me why you think it has happened. So I've just executed the curl command and I'm getting that kind of a message. So my question is, why do you think we are getting that message?
Because the
All
server
right.
can't manage. Oh,
Back in. Go to it.
Well, okay, well, Jason was talking first. Well, what I was about to say is because, like authenticated to access the server.
All right. My audio is still bad. Type in the chat.
Oh, okay. My bad, sir.
So I heard from Dene, who is in the room, while Joel is typing in the chat. And Joel and Dene gave me some response about UV So let me see what Joel is going to. All right, so the same thing. So yes, the problem is we have not started the server, which is why the message says, I mean, surprise, surprise, could not connect to server. So we need to ensure that before we try and get anything from the server, then first of all, the server must be accessible. It must be up and running. So we are going to use the uvicorn command. So it's uvicorn. The name of my file, remember, is server.py. So my file here is going to be server. We don't put the .py. There's a colon, and then there's the app. Remember, inside of my code, the app is what I assigned my FastAPI service to. And then I just using the reload option so that if you make any changes to your code, then the server will automatically stop and restart so that your changes are immediately recognized. So let's hit enter. And you're seeing here that it says that uvicorn has started. Note what it's running on. It's running on that same URL that we spoke about earlier, 127.0.0.1, which is our local machine. And it's looking at port 80 for data. Sorry, port 8000 for data. Notice it also says something about watch files. And this is the point that I had mentioned earlier, wherein I had indicated that if you make changes to the code because you had used the reload operation, then it would automatically be looking at your file. And as soon as you hit save, then the uvicorn server would reload, restart, so that whatever changes you have just made, they can be factored into the code base. All right, so we have started the server, and because the server has been started here, it means I need another terminal window. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use PowerShell as my terminal. Let me open that up quickly. Yeah, second. I'm bringing over PowerShell. It's just a terminal. And what I want to do is to use this same command that we had before. I want to make use of that inside my PowerShell. It's the same command. I just copy it and paste it. Now we know that the server is up and running. So I'm going to hit enter and we're going to say what obtains. And we love when things work. And you should be seeing that it works because you're seeing a list right here that has the apple, the banana, and the cherry. The very same items that we had placed in the list previously. So what it tells us is that our server is up and running. So we have just created our first API. The API is up and running. The API is able to understand a GET request. And in terms of understanding the GET request, it's able to generate an appropriate response. So we're able to see some data. All right. So a question is being asked by Joel. If we set at app.get, why do we have to specify it again in the terminal? I want you to look at what Joel has typed. So that is what is in the file. And I want you to look at, and I want you to look at what we have in the terminal. And you should realize that there are some differences. One difference is we're making use of the curl command. The other difference is the way we specify the get is different. The third thing is we are now making use of the URL. The URL where the item, the resource can be found. And what is the endpoint for the resource? The endpoint is the items. So this curl command is totally different from whatever we have here inside our file. So it's two different concepts. Inside my file, my .py file, my .py file, we are setting up the structure for the API so that the API can work. Once the API is working and it's running, then we must have a formal way to interact with that API. And that is the purpose of going to the PowerShell and using the curl command. So the curl command allows us to get access to an API that is running. Give you another analogy. When we did the fake store API, we would have used curl to interact with that fake store API. But what we have in the server.py right now is your attempt at creating a fake store API. This is your API that you have created from scratch. And once this is now up and running, then anybody in the world supposed to can now use the curl command and interact with your resource. It's just that you are wearing two hats right now. You are both the developer of the API and the consumer of the API at the same time. Because in order to effectively develop it, you have to be able to test it as you go along. So you have to be fitting into the two different roles. That is correct, Joel. So the app.get items in the parentheses is what is now allowing us to make use of the get command in curl. I'm going to make a small change. So notice I've called it items underscore new. I resave. Oh, I should have had the so once I save, then you notice that it reloads. And I'm going to go back to my PowerShell and I'm going to execute the same code. So notice the endpoint here is items, but the endpoint over here has changed. It is now items new. So let us see what is going to happen. So I hit enter. Oh, that shouldn't happen.
Sir, you did it for posts, not
Did
get.
I serve? Well, again, I didn't hear that.
I
You had
typed
it
it in
on
the chat,
post
sir.
items, not get
I
items,
did a
sir.
post a while ago. Let me double check that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right
Oh,
there. So like
oh,
op dot
yes, yes,
post.
yes, yes. Thanks. I was at the wrong place. I should have had it here. And that just goes to show we don't know everything, right? Can always make mistakes. All right, so going back again. So the get endpoint has now changed its items underscore new. So we are now going to hit enter over here under the, when we're using the curl command. And you're now seeing that we are getting an error message. And what the error message is actually saying is that we cannot interact with that endpoint. And we can't interact with that endpoint because there's no such endpoint. The endpoint is now called items underscore new. So if I change that now to items underscore new and I hit enter, then you now see that we are now able to get back access to the data. So I hope what has just transpired actually shows you the difference between you defining the endpoint in your API and you being able to access the endpoint using the curl command. All right, good. So this is a mouthful, and I am saying that you're going to have to take some time and build this. What I recommend is that you don't build it all at once. You build it endpoint by endpoint and test so that you understand and appreciate what is happening as you go through. So don't just write all the code that you see. Write the first endpoint, write the get endpoint. So the get endpoint would be here. So we have defined the endpoint. We have defined the endpoint there. So we have also defined the verb, the operation that we are targeting. It should target the get. We have also defined our function. So this is the function that should be executed, read underscore items. That is the function that should be executed whenever somebody goes to the items underscore new endpoint. And the statement that is going to be executed in this instance is going to be that it's going to return all the values which are found in the items list. So that's everything that is important that we need to consider when we are setting up our API. Now, just to have a quick look at the post, and then I'm going to stop here for the day and give you time to actually go through and sort out what it is you need to sort out in terms of starting to build this and experiment with it. And then when we come back in our next session, then we can deal with any challenges that you came up on as you went through this. Well, you shouldn't come up with any so far. All right. So I just want to highlight what is happening at the post. Now remember, get allows us to retrieve, but post allows us to send data. So the get, we are retrieving data or information from the API, or another way of putting it, we are retrieving data from the server. But with a post, we are sending data to the API, or putting it another way, we are sending data to the server. Now, and let me go back to what I had originally. If you look at the endpoints for both of these, the endpoint is the same. So for the get, the endpoint is items, but for the post, the endpoint is also items. And you might be asking the question, well, how can the endpoint be the same? Won't that create a confusion? And the answer is no, it won't create a confusion, because if you look carefully, you're going to realize that while the endpoint is the same, the verb that is being targeted in both cases is actually different. So in one instance, we are targeting the get verb, but in the other instance, we are targeting the post verb. So that means that how we call it in PowerShell using the curl command is going to be different. Because in one instance, we'll be using the get command, and in the other instance, we'll be using the post command. So it would be able to distinguish between the two endpoints in that regard. Yeah. If endpoints do, well, that is how we set it up in FastAPI. But the endpoint is the end of the URL that you are targeting. Going back to what we had here. So here is the example. So the API endpoint is post data, that last part on the URL. The URL tells you how to get to the server, remember. So in this case, it is HTTP, which is the protocol, localhost. By the way, localhost is the same thing as the IP address 127.0.0.1. It's your loopback address. You would have known that from networking. And this is because we are using our machine as the server. Now, if we had put this somewhere on the internet, it means that we would have a public IP address and we would give it a name. So instead of saying local host, we could say scarlet.com, for example. And that would resolve to a public IP address so that it's accessible on the internet. So that's what a fake store API would have done, for example. They would have published or procured some sort of public IP address, and then they put their domain name on that IP address so that you could have accessed it from where you are. All right, so jumping back here, just want to finish up the post, just to point out a few stuff. So the endpoint is the same, but the verb is different. Let's now have a look at the function that we have created to handle that. So the first thing is the name of our function. We call it create item because that's what we want to do. We want to create an item on the server. And notice that create item actually takes in some data. It takes in something called name, and name is actually a string. So it's going to take in a string value. Now, this is important. In terms of the code that is being executed, it says here that we are using the append command on the list. So items.append is the same as the list.append, and it takes in the name, whatever we have inside of name. What this does is it adds a value to the end of the list, which is why I'm saying we're going to do a refresher in terms of Python, because Python is important, seeing that we're using it as a tool for a lot of the stuff that we are doing. Suffice it to say, at this point, once we have a list, we can use the append command to add an item to the end of the list. And that's exactly what we are doing here. After we have added the item to the list, then we want to generate an appropriate message so that the user can understand what has happened. And so this message is saying we added something to the list, and we would indicate what that something is. So without further ado, let's also try that as well. Should have that command somewhere. Don't want to have to write it from scratch. So let me grab the code. I don't want to kill my terminal. Let me create a new terminal. And let me see if I can get back that. So we're doing the post, right? All right, so it would be this code. Let me copy this. And then let me jump over here. Let's do a clear. I'm going to drop it here. Now, just a few observations. There are some things that look the same and some things that look different, right? So we're making use of the curl command. I mean, no surprise there. Making use of the curl command. We are making use of the post, don't it? You see that, right, folks?
Yes,
All
sir.
right, good. So we're making use of the post. Remember, previously it was a get, but now it's a post. And because it's a post, it means that we need to be sending some data. Now, there are two ways to send data. There's something known as a query parameter, and there's something known as the request body. We're doing it the simple way first, right? So this is the query body, the query parameter, sorry. And notice that at the end of the endpoint is where we put the data. So the question sign important because that says we are using a query parameter. And now we're indicating what the value is. Note, the value that we're talking about is the same name. This is the variable that we had used, name. So we want to say that name is equal to the value that we want it to equal to. In other words, I want to add Guinea to the list. I hope that is clear. The other stuff remain the same. It's the same URL. And remember that we said we're targeting an endpoint with the same name. So those remain the same. What we have now added is the post and also the query parameters. So name is equal to Guinea. I hope it's a Guinea spell. If it's not a Guinea spell, make sure you spell Guinea on your machine. All right, so I'm going to hit enter, and then we're going to see what transpires, all right? So we hit enter, and notice it tells us for our message, we added Guinea. Now, for this to really work, when we go back and we do a get, we should be seeing Guinea added to the end of our list. Remember, there were 3 items in the list. I think what? Apple, banana, pine, something like that. We should now be seeing Guinea at the end of that. We should now be seeing 4 items. So let's test to see if that's true. So we're going to do back a get at the same items endpoint that we had interacted with earlier. It didn't enter now. Yeah, did I change it? Oh, I never restart the server now. I made some changes but never restart the server. So even though inside my server.py it's saying items, because we never save it, the endpoint is still being seen as being items underscore new. The important thing though is, as you can see inside our list, we now have Guinea at the end. So apple, banana, cherry, and we have added Guinea to the list. It therefore means that our post operation worked properly because we were able to update the list by making use of the curl command. All right, so the question is being asked, will that save or will the list reset once you close it? Now remember, a list is an in-memory data structure. So there's no persistence here. So yes, once you shut down, then we're gone back to only 3 things in the list. Remember, this is just being used as a tool to show you where we're going. And that's why I had indicated earlier that this is not a database. But what we can do here, it means that we can also do it with a database once you know how to connect to the database properly. So in terms of true persistence of data, you would be using either a database or you could use a file. We really don't want to use file at this stage, but maybe I will make you do the file first and then the database after, so that you're slowly moving up the trajectory in terms of complexity. Well, we could use a JSON file or we could just use a normal text file. But remember, once we have a file, it means that we're storing that thing on some storage medium, which is different from the list because the list is just in memory. I hope all of that is understood. Now I just take a few minutes to answer any questions and then we'll stop here. And on your own, you must at least get to this point where I am at in terms of constructing an API and being able to interact with it. For those of you who are more enterprising, then by all means, go through the entire thing, show it work, experiment with it. Remember what I had said though. Don't do everything in one. Do it piece by piece. Do the get first, and then you test, and then you do the post, and then you test, and then you do the delete, and then you test. But you know exactly where I'm going based on that. All right, so repeat which function. I'm not sure of which function you're talking about, Joel. Can you repeat its function? Which function? Oh, all right. So let me go to that message. All right. Yes. So the backtick activates the terminal. Yes. So it opens the terminal. Well, first of all, what are you using? are using Windows. So it's control with the back tick. So hold down the control key and the back tick. And that should be the shortcut to give you the terminal. Yes, it's a shortcut. So it's not just the back tick alone, it's the control with the back tick. If I didn't say that, I'm saying it now. And my apologies. Well, so the question here is, can APIs be applied to website development or strictly game design? It can be applied to anything. You could, for example, have a game where the resources that you're accessing are coming from some APIs that you have created. So what you'd want to know, and what we're also going to do is, well, let me put it this way. Right now, we are interacting with the APIs using the curl command external to any application. What we are going to be doing in the end is we are going to be seeing how can we do this in a programmatic way, meaning how can we have a Python program that actually accesses the APIs so that when we run the program, a user can, for example, press a up arrow and it initiates a call to the API and return it back. So I hope that answers that question, Mr. Dowdy. Yeah, so that's where we're going. So as I keep on saying, we keep on doing it in small chunks, which I think are simple chunks, so you kind of understand the concept. And then we keep on building up on that concept, adding more complexity, more layers, so that you become even more advanced in terms of the things that you are able to do and how you can get those done. All right, so the question here is, you thought you needed to enter what in the terminal, Joel?
Sir, the backtick. I thought to enter the backtick, sir.
Oh, okay. No. So it's a shortcut. So that is understood. All right, so the next thing you're
Okay,
saying
sir. I
here
was looking.
is that the AOA students have to use a Google Maps API to complete their project. All right, fine. But what is the consideration there?
No, because the person was asking, right, like, if it could be applied strictly to game design. But I was just saying that they had to use an API for their like project to calculate the fastest distance. So basically, what I was saying is that API can be used for like a majority of things because APIs are just mainly used for like integration. Well, how used to see APIs. With this topic now, I see APIs more than just integration, but APIs are mainly used for integration, from my understanding.
Some other things I'm never hear. And that is my bad. Because my
Oh yeah, I have to type it again. Okay, so let me
my
just type
my
a shorthand version.
and I do have a speaker, but I keep on forgetting it. That is the challenge. So here what though? So yes, the AOA students would have leveraged the Google Maps API in their project, which means they would not be using curl at a command line in PowerShell like what we're doing here. So we using curl here in the PowerShell is just showing you how to make an API call. As I was saying earlier, you are going to learn how to do this programmatically using tools which are available in Python. For example, there is a package called Axios, AXIOS, which will allow you to make Python function calls. Matter of fact, even when you're doing your mobile programming, you can separate your user interface from your backend. So you can use the mobile programming to create nice interfaces. And on the back end, you can have Python, for example, making calls to APIs, and then you're returning back those data, which are then rendered into your mobile programming interface. So what you're really learning here is really a very powerful concept that is actually being used in the industry. And just to remind you, APIs provide a simplified way for data to be transferred between applications. That's essentially what we're doing. All right, now outside of server side, you see in the tutorial in the, yeah man, so you should have something for the game design as well. I had uploaded something in the game design as well. So both the server side and the game design folder should be populated with some amount of content so far based on what we're doing. You're not seeing it in the folder? Yeah, the gaming has a recording in it. It should. So what you're not seeing? Oh, I know what you're not seeing. I know what you're not seeing. I know what you're not seeing, Joel. You're not seeing the let me just drop it in the chat. The go do tutorial, the link. Yeah, I think I had mistakenly deleted that file. Yeah. So let me just drop it in the chat so that you can copy it and share it. So you can just drop it for me, please, in the, that's where I was going to say. Just drop it in the, you drop it, yeah, man. Drop it in the gaming cohort. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that observation. All right, so any more questions? We're wrapping up now because I want to wrap up now, you know. All right, one last thing. So the at does what? It just signifies that we are making use of the fast API operations. It's what we call in some language, a decorator. So that's what the at symbol does. I hope that answers that. So just experiment with what you have so far, folks. And then, you know, we take it from there. Now, remember, we'll remind you again. Will I be around next week? No answer another chat, man. No. All right. Will you have work to do, even though I won't be here? Yeah, because of the Carla conference that I'll be attending. Will you have work to do, even
Sorry,
though I'm
sorry,
not
I
here?
thought the call.
Yes, you will have work to do. What do you mean by I hope not? You'll have work to do.
Sorry, question.
Yes.
The Carla conference, it's a 1 day thing, right? Or is
No,
it two
man, it's
days?
for the
Because
week.
you said it also in.
It's for the
Oh, it's
week,
for the week. Okay.
from the 22nd to the
Okay.
26th.
Oh,
So
okay.
I
So, all
will
right. Thank you.
ensure that you have work to do, things to watch, and things to accomplish. Once again, if you want to volunteer and be, it's still not too late as it, I think. But you'll have things to do next week anyway, even though I won't be around physically. Yeah? So that's it for us for today. And we will be in touch. So I'm going to stop the recording, and you folks have a wonderful rest of the day. Yeah, man, no problem, sir. Dowie. Bless up.
All right, later, sir.
Yeah, man, guidance. Yeah, man, as soon as the recording is posted, I'll let you know. You can just check the folder.